and welcome to Sonic Talk episode 451. That's right, 451 being the nomenclature of a rather classic AKG microphone, which I might mention a little bit on later. This is the podcast that talks about music technology, music production, electronic music, live music, all of those kind of things to do with synthesizers, software, all of that kind of stuff. So if this is your first time watching, you might be watching via sonicstate.com/live, which is where we embed the player and we have our own IC chat room, or you might be watching this on YouTube Live, which welcome to you if you are, because it's always good to have people from all over the place. But whichever it is, why not subscribe? You can subscribe to the video feed, goes up. We've got this live feed, but we also got it goes up onto YouTube shortly afterwards. Also, if you're interested, MP3 version, audio only for listening on your commute to work or whatever, you can subscribe on iTunes. Anyway, welcome one and all. I want to say, oh yes, and thank you to our sponsors, iZotope. There is going to be a word from them a bit later on. You have the chance to win their new vocoder software, vocal processing software, a vocal synth. That's going to be about halfway through the show, so do stay tuned. Right, let's get on to our guests. Let's start with Ty. Oh no, that's not Ty Unwin. Let's start with Ty Unwin. Very busy film, TV, music composer. In fact, although you said you'd come on if you were really desperately needed, I had a feeling that you wanted me to ask you, because you did show up in the chat room, so I hope I'm not coercing you. I got the feeling that you were looking for a reason to be here. How are you, Ty?
I'm not. I'm fine, thank you. I'm very tired. I'm right in the middle of a stupid deadline for tomorrow, and I won't sleep tonight, but that's fine. I just really need an excuse just to not be working, to be fair. So thank you for the excuse.
That's all right. And indeed, hopefully this will clear your creative buffers and you'll be able to get back with it anew and perhaps even save more time than you've lost by participating.
Do you know, I'd love to say that. The reality will be I'll be cursing everybody at 8 o'clock in the morning with me going, why did I say I'd do that? That's reality.
Well, but, I won't feel at all affronted because I won't be there. Anyway, welcome, Ty. That's a pleasure to have you. There were people in the chat room actually who were asking what it is you were working on, if that was at all something that you could even talk about, or maybe just loose details.
Yeah, no, this one I can. It's a BBC series about 1066, about the Battle of 1066.
Battle of Hastings.
Battle of Hastings, yeah. So 3 1 hours and a ridiculous deadline.
Wow, yeah.
And lots of music.
Lots of music.
The good thing about it is that we're not going for a conventional score, so everyone imagines it's going to be quite period and whatever, but no, it's very, very synth heavy and lots of very distorted analog synths.
Baroque and roll, as I like to say.
Yeah, it's good. It's working out well.
Excellent.
More time.
Well, 1066, for those of you who didn't know, was when the Norman Conquest happened. And I went to Hastings a couple of years ago and found out about the history. I didn't realise this, but bear with me. But at the time that the Norman Conquest happened, Britain was in a more it was in a very sort of almost a holistic kind of phase with the Saxon economy and everything, and people were sort of much more into kind of cooperation and monetary union, all those sort of things. Whereas actually when the invasion happened, they brought in a massive feudal system, got all the kind of posh French toffs in to cut up the land and get the peasants working for them again, and it completely changed the face of England. There are parallels if you're into the EU vote, but I won't go there. That's as political as I'll ever get. Anyway, let's jump across to the pond where things are politically more safe, possibly, in terms of EU voting, anyway, to Mr. Richard Hilton, who's from Chic and also mans the controls for Nile Rodgers Studio and is always swimming with the big creative fish. How are you, Rich?
Very good, thank you.
Excellent. I'm very glad to hear that. What's been happening in your week? Have you been head down in the studio working on some exciting waxing hotties, as I like to say?
I've been doing some work here, yeah, and I've also just returned from visiting my son, whose birthday is today.
Ah, happy birthday. Which one?
Corey.
Happy birthday, Corey. I think there used to be a thing on Kids TV where you'd say there would be a puppet that did all the continuity announcements, and you'd give them away for people's birthdays. So take this as some kind of feeble effort to do something along that line.
He's 21 today.
Ah, But how could he possibly be so old, Rich? You
Really?
Don't look a day over 21 yourself. Anyway, thank you, Rich.
Thank you.
I don't know what's got into me today. Gaz Williams as well there over in Bristol, where he is working on various music productions. He's also a bass player and very keen music technologies. In fact, we published another one of our Volca Vibes series today, which was to do with the MIDI splitting business. Anyway, how are you?
Cool. Yeah, good, thanks. Something I've always pondered about was there was a rock band called the Saxons, called Saxon.
Yes, I remember them.
But the Normans kicked the Saxons' bum, so why was there ever a rock band called the Normans?
Not quite as, maybe not quite as sexy a word. I mean, Saxon, sexy, Norman doesn't sound quite so sexy, perhaps. But yes, I take your point. Maybe they could have done like Motorhead and Girls' School formed a collaboration the way you had Motorhead v Circo. You could have Normans versus Saxon. You know, in one of those. This is getting really the sealed knot where they have reenactments of various historical battles and everybody dresses up and kind of goes and runs about in muddy fields for a couple of hours, and that seems to be something that people do at a weekend. Not around here, though, I must add. Perhaps we should talk about music technology and stuff. Actually, firstly, I wanted to, before I got there, because this is episode 451, I thought I was trying to find, I've got a 451 EB, which is a black one. This is the legendary AKG mic, which started out, the C series started out a long time ago, but these were in the sort of 80s, and you saw them on acoustic guitars, hi-hats, all over the place. A very sort of pencil, and you could change the capsule. I think the CK1 was what it came with, which was a hypercardioid, and I used to hear them. They were really fizzy and toppy. Do you recall those, Rich? Were they ever so big in the States, possibly?
Oh yeah,
match pairs for overheads.
That was your default small diaphragm condenser microphone, and as you said, hi-hats, occasional acoustic guitars, things where you needed a lot of sparkle.
Yeah, they had a curve on them, didn't they? They definitely weren't flat.
Well, I don't know. Well, what is flat? But it's got a sound, and it's still useful. And when I see one, I'm never sad. That's flat, huh?
This is flat. Well, when it's flat, it's flat. That's the sort of thing. But
after the Flat Earth Society meeting, we go to the Flat Audio Society meeting.
The Flat Audio Society. Yeah, I remember when I got one. I can't remember why I bought it. I used to do a lot of live sound. I thought, usually you'd end up with just a bunch of really worn-out, crummy SM58 mics at any venue you'd go to when I was touring. So I'd take my 451, and I always use. But when I first got it, I just thought it sounded really kind of like brittle and shiny and very different to what I'd expected. I guess it wasn't that expensive, but still have a lot of use for them, I guess. Although Ribbon seems to have taken over from those duties to a degree. Not on hi-hats, possibly, but certainly on acoustic guitars, right?
Different vibe. Absolutely.
Yes,
Ribbons are wonderful and very popular these days.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, they've got so much better. Gaz, got any fond memories of the 451? We could move this section on quickly because it's obviously not quite as thrilling as I thought it was going to be.
451? Gosh, not particularly. I've never had one. I've never owned one. I've used them loads. I mean, they're just like one of those venerable sort of you would expect to see it in the mic locker, wouldn't you? The 451.
Yeah.
Yeah, I quite like them. I've used them. I'd use them on acoustic guitars, and I've used them on loads of things. Actually, thinking about it,
good on the string on the fretboard rather than on the sound hole. I seem to remember.
Yeah, about 12th fret. Sorry, I haven't got any takes on that one. Sorry.
Right, Ty.
Next.
Okay, brilliant. Right, let's move on then. Anyway, this is sort of dedicated to the AKG 451, one of those kind of stalwarts of. It's the condenser equivalent of perhaps the 57 or the 58, perhaps would be an ish thing. Okay, perhaps not. Right, let's.
Small diaphragm.
Small diaphragm, right, okay. 451 hats. This is... Have I got this here? This is the... I think I've got a page here for it somewhere. Yeah, this was kind of cool. I didn't spot these coming, but it makes a lot of sense. These are the new iConnectivity range, the MIOs, based loosely, based heavily on the hardware, the 2 Plus and the 4 Plus. I must confess, I know that sometimes I've had a little bit of issue, but They are really useful audio MIDI interface. These are just MIDI only. They come in 3 flavors: the MIO 10, which has got 10 by 10, but it's also got USB connectivity. You've got a couple of ports on there and a host port, so you can plug in class compliant controllers and bring that into the MIDI matrix. But the interesting thing is also you can move it around via MIDI over Ethernet, which is RTP MIDI, which is a really useful. This entire show is running on RTP MIDI and MIDI over. Although I'm not using a MIDI IO, I'm using it on my live set, which I finally discovered why my live setup didn't work last time when we did the Bristol gig was because I didn't save the settings into the flash ROM. But these 3, we've got the MIO 10, which I think is about $200, MIO 4, which is about $149, $300 for the M10, and then the MIO 2, which doesn't have the Ethernet port but has 4 ports and you can plug 2 computers into it, is about $69. Jolly, MIDI interface is very dull sort of fodder for reviews, perhaps, but really blooming useful. I'm going to go to you, Ty, first, because you must have a whole pile of MIDI ports required for your setup, because if you probably can't see at the moment because the video is a little bit blocky, that you have a ton of synths. What are you using for your interfaces?
I'm running Mark of the Unicorn, the XTs. I'm running 4 of those. And I'm running 2 of the Steinberg Mid-X8. Do you remember those?
Yes, I do.
So I'm 6, basically. I'm running 6 8x8s at the moment, basically.
Wow, and I bet that's not quite enough.
Well, I kind of have to start running, kind of things on. I like to try and keep things on independent outputs, but a lot of the time I have to run multiple channels. But I have to say, I had no knowledge of these until you kind of brought them up, and they look great. I've got their Connect 4 and the 2, the iPad and the Connect work really well. I think I'll probably just change my entire setup for these because there's not many MIDI interfaces out there that are really kind of rock solid. And I have an issue with mine at the moment because I run Nuendo, and Nuendo basically thinks the Mark of the Unicorn basis, which you can imagine how frustrating that is. So I'll boot up my template, and all of a sudden I'll have no MIDI. And the only way of doing it is to unplug all the interfaces, plug them all back in, and then reboot, and then it will appear.
Oh, that's what you want.
That's really time consuming. So if these work, I'll probably just change everything for these because they look great. And they look really good value as well.
Oh, I think I just got Ty, your audio connection has dropped. I wonder if it might be worth just flipping your video off for a second so that we can get the benefit of your voice. Then that would make. But I think if you didn't get all of that, then I think Ty uses Motus. But I mean, the thing about these is because they've got Ethernet connectivity, you can have them standalone, have a bunch of stuff plugged into them, and have them miles away and feed it back over the Ethernet network. I don't know, Rich. They're an American company, and I know they've been, they haven't necessarily been quick to get their hardware out there. But when they first came out, the MIDI IO, what was it? The iConnectivity MIDI 4 Plus and 2 Plus allowed you to connect the audio from the iPads as well. But do you have much use for MIDI interfaces in your studio?
I bought one of theirs within the last 6 months, as a matter of fact.
Which one did you get?
A little 2x2. Whatever the previous little 2x2 one was. I had a remote situation where the previous one that I had there failed, and I needed another, and I looked into this, and I liked it, and I bought it, and it works great. And it's class compliant, and nary a problem. It's just fantastic.
And then you can configure the internal settings with all sorts of filtering and port routings and stuff, which I think that's the only downside to this. The configuration is a little bit of a kind of like, wow, particularly if you've got a 4 Plus or maybe if it's a 10 Plus, I can't imagine, because each of the USB ports has, I think, 4 ports built in as well, so it can be a bit of daunting to begin.
Well, but I know people have been pining away since opcode for interface capabilities that would mirror what that last one, the name escapes me at the moment, did, and that they used to base whole live shows on. And if this allows that degree of configurability, and I didn't even look into that, then that would be fantastic. What I think is particularly unique about these devices is they allow connection simultaneously to more than one computer.
Yeah.
And that's pretty cool.
Including or an iOS device as well, which is...
Or a computer and iOS device, what have you. But that's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, that is pretty neat. Gaz, I know, I mean, me and you both kind of jumped as soon as we heard about the 4 Pluses, and I think you got a 2 as well. I mean, I think you had some issues with yours, but I don't know if that's been resolved. But, I mean, this is a good idea in terms of just... that level of MIDI configurability and routing is actually, you know, while rather utilitarian, the possibilities are very helpful.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem to say iOS, though, anywhere in the bump about it. It's sort of particularly going PC or Mac. I didn't notice that it was... I'm assuming that it's going to work iOS. Yeah, I mean, I've got... Yeah, as you say, I got the 4 Plus and I've got the 2 as well. One of the best things about them is when you use the host mode in the configuration software, you can reserve USB ports. And that's really handy. And it seems like, I think that's the only system I've seen that can do that. So on my one, I've got, so the USB host can host 8 separate USB devices.
Oh, via a hub?
Via a hub. But in the configuration software, you can reserve it. So, and now it's a little bit of a kerfuffle. Once you've reserved them, you can then rename those ports. But in order for the computer to read those ports with the names custom names. So, for instance, I've got my OP1 on host 5. So I'd rename that. So rather than it coming up as iConnectivity USB host 4, it'll just come up as OP1, which is what you want, really. You want to just sort of look for it and see it. In order to get that to work, though, is a bit of a kerfuffle. You have to reset your entire MIDI system. Oh, it's a real pain. It's a pain. But once that is actually set up, then it's the only time I've ever managed to get USB to reliably work. So if I've got a project, for instance, that's addressing various MIDI devices on the USB host ports, it's not just, normally when it turns on, boots up, they just
it's arbitrary. Yeah, it's just arbitrary, right?
So you can reserve it. Now this will absolutely have the same function, I'm sure, but it does mean then that it will remember where they are. So when you load up your project, all the MIDI will still be addressing the same units, which is kind of what you'd expect it to do, but doesn't. So that I think is a fantastic aspect of them.
Price isn't bad too either. I mean, the 10x10 seems, that's the big one. It's what, $300. So what's that, about 220 quid or something, which seems pretty real. And they're good, solidly. But I guess that we remember you did that interview with Beardy Man, and he was running into all sorts of problems because he's got so many USB devices plugged into his computer controllers or what have you. They do exactly that. They jostle for kind of permission to use. So if he had one of those in between with a host port, a 4 Plus, then that might solve that problem because you only.
I'm sure it would. I found that aspect to be pretty robust of the iConnectivity. So I think it's definitely something to applaud because I think with so many devices I've got USB MIDI on. So so that definitely is a cool thing. The whole thing with the real sort of thing that made those iConnectivity headline grabbing was that audio pass through, but now it's less important now, isn't it? Because we can connect iPads and the like directly to computers with the latest.
It depends on what iOS and what OS operating system you've got as well. If you don't want to jump, which frankly lots of people don't want to go to, the latest, then they've got that option. Mm-hmm. So isn't it great that we're talking about these things now, and it's still 30 plus years since MIDI, and it's still got to play such a massive role. I'm going to come to you, Ty, just to test your audio, just in case because I can't tell whether you've dropped off or not because you're.
No, I'm still here.
That's much better. That's a much better. Yeah, that's great. Although we haven't got your beautiful background, we can at least hear you. That's much better.
Believe me, it's not that impressive. It's just some blue lights and a red t-shirt.
Oh, Ty's been working too hard. He's on a downer. It's not. It's a fantastic setup. What are you talking about? Anyway, you can buy these things. I think you can get them now. It looks like it. Basically, it looks like you can order them directly from the iConnectivity site because there is actually if we go back a page, I think there was you can add to cart or find a retailer in your region. So yeah, good job. Look, I seem to have 2 in my cart. I'm not buying one at the moment. So
I think the point is that, as Gaz was saying, really the fact that anything that can take anything off the strain of USB hubs for me would be fantastic. So at the moment I've got, so that's 6 things with 64 channels coming out of, whatever it is, 128 channels, all coming out of 6 USB ports. If I can take those off and stick them on a network, that's going to make my life a lot easier. So
yeah, I mean, I didn't find the RTP MIDI doesn't really introduce an awful lot of latency into the system. I'm guessing you can have a dedicated router for it too if you really wanted to be
exactly
to do that. And of course, RTP MIDI is built into OS X. You can get a little utility for Windows which just runs and it sees the nodes on the network, and you can go, I want to create a session between this and what have you, and you can create a session within the network, and all your devices can join it without getting too technical about it. But hey, we're a music tech show, so why shouldn't we? Is what I say.
Yeah.
So yeah, do check it out. That's iConnectivity.com if you want to check those out. So I think let's have a look. Oh yeah, this is another. I think this might the Reakktor Blocks has just come out, and I know Rich, you found another. There's also the soft tube modular thing. But what I think I'm going to do, because time's moving on, I think we'll just pop in the a note from our sponsors, and then we'll come back to that. So stay tuned, folks. This is basically. iZotope have released the new vocal synth, and we want to thank them very much for their sponsorship of the show.
Tell me we're looking. Tell me we're blind.
Vocal synth has a number of vocal processing engines. We've got Polyvox, which gives organic harmonies built from your voice, and I'm guessing this must utilise some of iZotope's magic algorithms. Vocoder module as well. If you're watching this on video, that actually is the former iZotope fairy. A CompuVox, which is more of a computerized kind of, and TalkBox.
Till we stopped on a rustic highway. Give me another chance.
If you want to check this out, go iZotope.com/vocal synth. So once again, we thank iZotope for sponsoring the show, and we do have a competition winner from last week. We asked you to tweet the hashtag vocal synth and voice manipulator to the Twitter handles at iZotope Inc. and at Sonic State, and we have a winner. This is from Ian Gould, whose Twitter handle is at the Grand Manor. The Grand Manor, if you're listening, and he also added a little bit of extra information. EDM is one of the sort of Viz top tips. EDM producers transform boring plonkers into vocal bonkers with vocal synth. I think that's quite witty. So once again, if you want to get in touch, the Grand Manor, your Twitter handle, then we will instruct the current iZotope fairy to deposit the vocal synth into your inbox. Now, of course, we've also got a competition for this week, and you can win your very own copy of iZotope's vocal synth. We want you to tweet the hashtag Supervoice, that's one word, the hashtag Supervoice, and the hashtag vocal synth to at Sonic State and at iZotope Inc. So for those listening in audio, I'll say it again, tweet the hashtag Supervoice, one word, and the hashtag vocal synth, one word, to at Sonic State and at iZotope Inc. Once again, we thank iZotope for sponsorship of the show. Thank you very much. Right, let's get on to a bit of modular action. This is the news that Reakktor Blocks 1.2 is out. We've seen some previews of this before, but they've introduced some really interesting new features. This is calibration, so you can calibrate and scale CV I/O for your analog modules. I'm guessing that's some kind of OSC device that's also being converted into some kind of controller information to CV. Very twingy and twangy, this. But essentially, they've got, I think there are, how many new modules are there? There are, there's a pitch CV out, there is gates and triggers, also MIDI output, and then there's a couple of new other modules in there, machine sequencer and Niji drums. Now, we did see this at Superbooth, and what this essentially did is it interfaces with is it DC or AC coupled? DC coupled, AC coupled, I can't remember, audio interface, which allows you to output effectively control voltages and trigger voltages out of an audio interface, such as the Expert Sleepers. A lot of the Motu stuff does it. I think RME does it as well. So you just need one of those kind of interfaces to be able to then speak real world into CV and gate, and also read it back in. That was the calibration routine at the beginning. The thing that's very interesting about the calibration routine is you can calibrate something that may not be originally designed for actual pitch scaling, because it can compensate for the offness of it. So if it's not designed to do it, it can actually figure out what it needs to do and create a custom curve to be able to do that. So there's some really interesting possibilities there. I don't know, Rich, I mean, you mentioned also the soft tube version of this. I mean, Reaktor obviously is a much more advanced piece of software than perhaps the soft tube, which is still at that sort of version 1 or version.
Well, my impression of the soft tube thing was that it was sort of a software-based mock-up of hardware modular, whereas this is an interface protocol that allows you to use your existing hardware modular with their software.
Well, that's true.
I understand.
That's true, but Blocks also contains a number of modules that are emulations of existing modules too. So you can incorporate those. So you can do software versions and then go into the, join it up with stuff that perhaps isn't being made. 'Cause it's all built in Reaktor, right?
It seems, yes. It looks to me like this brings together two very currently popular worlds into one creative, cool environment. I mean, I'm looking very much forward to hearing people come up with cool results with this thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it could be a kind of missing link in many ways. I know, Ty, you're in the world of modular. Would this be something that's going to be useful in your system? I mean, you may already have it. You may already be.
No, do you know? It's one of those things. It's always just it's just on my list of things to check out, things to buy, basically. And I just haven't got round. I haven't got round to doing it yet. I mean, I'm a big Reaktor user, but I haven't got the latest version. I haven't done the update on it. I mean, it makes total sense. I mean, because this is kind of what people have been wanting forever and a day, really. It's just anything that can really integrate software and hardware surely is the way forward. And because now, all things analog, all things modular, it seems a perfect way of integrating the two. So, I mean, it's a bit of from my point of view, it's a bit of a no-brainer when I can eventually, pull my finger out of my arse to get around to buying it.
I can imagine. No, I can imagine. I mean, this is the thing. I mean, that's the curse of being very busy. I mean, sometimes you need to, you can find time to then re-explore some new equipment, and then, it recharges your technical and bank, so you can then go, I could use this here and this, that, there. I mean, I can understand that. How that works.
Absolutely, and you're exactly right. That is the thing. But it's just having that time to do it. When you have the time, that's when all the real creative stuff happens. And I can see this being, from my point of view, really, really useful and really creative, because I love Reaktor. I love all the hardware. So anything that can combine the two is great.
Yeah, and I'm guessing the thing is those I/O modules, because the voltage is generated in software, it's going to be able to talk to your Moog modular, it's going to be able to talk to Eurorack stuff, it's going to be able to talk all sorts of ways, and that, I guess, is a good thing. I guess you've got some stuff that Erebus has got some CV control. I think you've got some Arturia stuff. I don't know whether that this is something. I mean, you're not so deep in the modular world that this would perhaps excite you initially.
Not yet. I was also puzzled why the machine integration only supports the Mark II and not the Mark I or the Studio. It seems a bit puzzling, that, to me, so I'm not quite sure why that is. Because ostensibly they're very similar. I don't quite understand that. Yeah. But, I mean, this is cool. It's dead cool. I think it's a really exciting development. For me, at the moment, I've just got such a distant relationship with software. I just spending very little time with music software. So I probably will come back into it for sure. But I don't know. I do need to get Reaktor, actually, because the MIDI bass that I'm using, the industrial radio bass, has a special module that only works with the new Reaktor with the blocks. So they've got this thing called the imprint. So I do need to get it. So yeah, I should. Sorry, I haven't got much to add to that though.
Well, one thing that, I mean, this kind of got me thinking a little bit. We recently did a Meet the Makers with Mark Verbos, who is a really smart guy, builds Verbos electronic stuff. It does some really cool kind of West Coast philosophy type synthesizer modules. And we were discussing, where things could go, because one thing that he was thinking was, everybody he sees performing live with modular has to have a mixer, and he was thinking, well, maybe we should have a mixer in Eurorack, which is we're starting to see. But then we get into this problem with Eurorack because of its small format, or not, or in spite of which, however way you want to look at it. What happens when you start to build a patch? It almost becomes inoperable. The more complex it is, the less easy it is to use because there's so much stuff in the way of it. There's the cables, and so it's actually it becomes quite operably difficult to do. And something like this Native Instruments blocks could, because you could imagine the patch bay then becomes something separate to the actual modules. I mean, if it's interfacing with the module as well, great, but you might need less of it because you're not doing some of those clever things that you would normally need different hardware for. So I mean, in terms of the evolution of this kind of interface, I think that's quite an interesting idea. I don't know, Rich, how you feel about it, because I mean, that's the thing about modular. It's a victim of its own format, because the more complex a patch, the more difficult it is either to deconstruct it or to operate it. I found, certainly in those smaller formats.
Agreed. Understood. I guess that's why they used big patch cables at the beginning and spaced the modules out bigger, and that's why Moog stuff is so big. Yeah,
well, the Mother 32 obviously does that. We've another Meet the Makers, which is coming up soon. We're talking to Steve Dunnington, and we talked about the Mother, and they decided to go for the patch bay to the right of the controls, for that very reason. But there is definitely a very strong school of thought that says, there has to be a certain way, the input has to be near the knob, or just because it's easier to follow. But it's an interesting design issue because of the size and scale of Eurorack and how big it's become so quickly. More and more people are going to be finding this, because that is a barrier for many people, because they just look at it and go, my God, what's this? It's just so hard to read in many ways. And I can't think of a single other. I mean, it's like the studio patch bay at work, I guess. If you've got a Bantam patch where it's very tightly packed, I mean, that's even more difficult unless you really know the layout, and the layout is done in a very, that again is quite hard to read and quite hard to find your way around if you're doing it for the first time. So I suppose there are parallels there, maybe, or am I clutching again?
I'll take it.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much.
Then there's the tiny sizer.
Yeah, well, with the little cable connectors. Yeah, that's crazy, isn't it? That really is. Yeah. I did have some more notes on this, but I can't remember where they are now. But anyway, basically, Native Instruments blocks. What's really interesting about this is Reaktor 6 has actually come down in price, and that includes blocks. It's like $199. You can upgrade for $89, I think it is, and all of this stuff comes with it. And then, of course, people are going to be are encouraged to build their own modules, and then you can sell them via the Reaktor store and buy them as kind of additional things, which is kind of similar to what Softube are doing, which is something that you mentioned. The idea, they've built the modular interface, sort of licensed or emulated, certainly quite a lot of dope for modules. I think if I can click this, it might load. It doesn't seem to want to load. Oh, there we go. So we've got dope for modules and IntelliGel and various ones of their own. And their kind of notion is that you could then buy additional modules. I mean, I think, and that the price for that, they've just reduced it from $99 to $79 to the 17th of July. So that might be something that you want to check out as well. Although it has to say, there are less modules available. It is limited to the ones that they've got, and obviously you need to buy through Softube and have those emulations through them, which I guess might make it a smaller library of things to play with. But I wouldn't mind checking it out. It's just, I think without the hardware interaction as well as the software interaction, it becomes, again, like you say, Gaz, kind of removed. And complex software is exactly that. It's almost as much as a turn off as a huge pile of cables going into a Eurorack that you then have to try and figure out what it is, or how did I get that patch.
I should also mention, I think that version of Reaktor, because I noticed that they're pushing Complete 10 at the moment on sale, I think, but doesn't come with that version of Reaktor. So just it's worth noting that, I think, because I nearly fell for that one.
Oh, what? So it's a separate upgrade, so you have to pay another $89 to get the blocks, is that?
Yeah, what comes with Complete 10 is the previous version of Reaktor.
So sort of incomplete 10, then, really.
Yeah. Well, it's only because 11's going to appear, not in the not too distant future.
Ah, okay, right. Oh, yeah, because 10 was 10 last summer.
Yes.
Summer before, I think. Was it the summer before?
Maybe 2 summers ago.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So we skipped a year in terms of complete packages then?
Yeah.
Wow.
There wasn't a complete last year.
Okay, right. Well, that's, I didn't know that. There you go. Learn something new every day. Okay, right. Let's see. Always nice to see a new instrument discovered. This is the Subharchord. This is from the GDR. This is a video via Das Filter. It's in German, but with English subtitles. But it's this monstrous it developed in isolation almost because of the Iron Curtain and the way that technology was kind of hidden behind it. It was, interestingly enough, also developed at the Funkhaus in Berlin, where we went for Superbooth, which is a beautiful booth. These are some of the beauty shots of it. This is something called a Subharmonic synthesizer, and it's this was on Peter Kern's Create Digital Music blog because he's in Berlin, and I think it made an appearance quite recently at the Funkhaus where it played. It was played. So I'll just let this play for a bit, and you can have a sense of what it is. The size of that.
Für mich besteht die Faszination dieses Instrumentes darin, dass es mehr ist als ein bloßes Musik.
This is Manfred Miersch, who's a historian who's got access to one of the few remaining working ones in history. I won't play the whole thing. I encourage you to watch that. I mean, if you're interested in of unique and unusual electronic instruments, because I mean, these things are becoming a massive rarity. To have one suddenly come into the public consciousness like this is actually a fairly major event. I mean, this doesn't happen very often, right, Rich? I mean, I can't think of the last time. It's certainly sort of the other side of the Western world. I'm sure there must be more to come, I hope, because I always find it endlessly fascinating.
Well, I certainly found this thing pretty fascinating. And I'd never seen or heard of it before, and that's not typical for me. I like to think I know about these things.
Yeah, it's one of those hidden gems. The thing that's interesting, I didn't know this, it's a subharmonic generator, because traditionally harmonic generators generally fundamental and then multiply up the harmonics, whereas what this does takes the fundamental and divide, so it goes into, I guess, I don't know what, it's just a slightly different approach, but it seems like it's supposed to, it's described as a kind of an ethereal organ with lots of very weird stuff going on, and it had aftertouch back then in 1958 when it was developed, which is always, as you know, I do like to know these things, but I haven't heard any great examples of the sound it makes. I must admit, it did sound certainly very experimental.
Yeah, and it was like some kind of open mic in a room. It wasn't that it wasn't presented from an audio purist standpoint in that video. But he certainly is interested in it and seemed to know his way around it quite a bit.
Absolutely. I know, Gaz, you're probably the mention of the Funkhaus yet again. There we go. I'm so privileged to be able to go. I didn't see one of these there, but I like the controls on this thing because it had those kind of controls that you found in the wall at the Funkhaus and all those kind of funny little unusual electronic components we didn't get here.
I mean, is there any plans to turn it into a virtual instrument at all, to sample it?
You know what? I think there has been a Reaktor construction of certainly subharmonic synthesis, but I have to dig a bit more deeper on that. So I think there might be an ensemble that has some of the capabilities.
Because, I mean, especially with rare instruments, that is one of the great things about virtual instrument, I think, is to be able to sort of make those instruments live on, So I think that would be great. I'd be very interested. This reminds me a bit of, slightly in sound to the Novachord, the Hammond synthesizer Novachord, just in that odd, can't quite place it sound. And, of course, the Novachord that had vanished, hadn't it, virtually, until it was someone renovated one, and then it turned into a virtual instrument.
Well, that was Dan Wilson, who's Hideaway Studios, who's ran it, and I went to see it. And he lives in a kind of fairly standard detached house near a main road, and I went in. It's just full of 1950s, 1960s electronics. I mean, and it was there. I think it was Mark Doty's originally, or Mark Doty somehow had a connection with it, and he restored. And those things just sound absolutely beautiful. They've got something about them. They're very, I think, fully polyphonic, and it's based on sort of organ technology. But they did sound absolutely lovely, but very, very rare, and weigh probably half a ton, I would think. I don't know if anyone's ever seen one. Ty, have you ever had a chance to see one of those in the flesh? I imagine you haven't heard of this before, because it's
no, it's. I used to be really into this, I've said this before about being into kind of 1940s, 50s, 60s avant-garde electronic music, and I used to really be into it. And so I did honestly think I kind of knew, just through years of reading. We all know about the Traumatron and, as Gaz said, the Novachord, and I thought I kind of knew all of them. They're out there, and I've never heard of this one. But they are really exciting, and I think the thing that makes them special is that it's that crossover between they are real instruments. They look like real instruments. They feel like real instruments, and that's what a lot of more modern stuff just doesn't feel like, and a lot of it's psychological sometimes. But do you know what I mean? It's like the sound production, and as you're feeling it, as you're playing it, it feels as one, if that makes sense. And I think these days, with a lot of technology, that it doesn't have that kind of warmth. It's because it feels like the sound production and the interface are separate things. Right. And that's what I think makes these kind of old-fashioned instruments special, just because they feel like real instruments, and they do sound, they sound unusual and otherworldly, and in some ways, quite basic, but there's still a quality about the sound which is beautiful. It really is beautiful.
Yeah.
So I thought this clip was amazing. I mean,
well, I
really
imagine
was
if you're
amazing.
into that. Apparently, it was based on. Now I've got the notes here. It was based on, or it came out of the mixture tritonium, which was a variant on the original tritonium, and that used subharmonic synthesis. It was apparently used in Hitchcock's The Bird soundtrack quite extensively. So if you want an example of subharmonic synthesis, then that's the place to go. Although I can imagine it might be difficult to find it completely out there. One thing that was really good about this, obviously the GDR broadcast system, they obviously put quite a lot of money into this, and they released all of these electronic records, in much of the same way that there was a lot of stuff coming out of BBC Radiophonic Workshop. But in the GDR, what Manfred was saying was they'd make all, because it was an orchestral recording facility as well, so they'd make all of these kind of albums which would be dance music or music for children or whatever, and then they'd slip one of these experimental electronic tracks into the album at some point, to try and lessen its kind of its impact and not sort of bring down the atmosphere too much. And I'm guessing these must have been official kind of state releases of obscure experimental electronic music, which I just thought, what a kind of brilliant notion.
A great idea.
Yeah, isn't that? It's quite subversive, isn't it? You just imagine in the maybe in the next X Factor Greatest Hits of 2015 album, Cal gets to throw in a sort of experimental Trautonium track or something. That would just be awesome. But I think it's unlikely. Maybe we should have maybe if we leave the EU, we can introduce some UK-specific legislation that says that has to happen. Any pure pop releases have to have one experimental track thrown in there, just because.
That'll work.
Yeah, I can see people voting for that. Mind you, they vote for anything from what I can see. Anyway, I won't go on too much more about that because. But it's an interesting concept. I do like that. Okay, right. Here's another one. This is one for your very heart, Gaz, I'd imagine. This is a chap called Joachim Ekblad, who took the trouble took the time to go to the Swedish lake on National Swedish Day on the 6th of June and do a purely battery-powered outside synth jam. I noticed one of them's wearing a waterproof, which does make me feel really nervous about doing that sort of thing. I suppose you're not talking, full 240 volts. What a lovely idea, though. I won't play it all. I encourage you to go and check that. That came over at Synthtopia. James Lewin posted it over there. Gaz, do you think that... and this, two things. Obviously, with the advent of battery power and all these things, it means that we can do all of these things in unusual spaces. Do you think... I know you're a big exponent of playing to the space. You did all those experiments with your bass rig and playing in specific rooms and try... how did those experiments go? Do you think that the space, when you compose in it, greatly affects...
Yeah, well, I think so. I mean, and I've got quite a few battery things, and I've taken them out and set them up in places. And when I've played in those places, like I'm thinking about this one a big garden. There's a thing called a spinney, which is like a kind of central part. It's all like enclosed with woodland, and you have to kind of go through a little tunnel to get into the middle of it. And then there was like there was some statues and stuff in the middle of this place, and so I put various synths around in there. Should have got some footage of it, really, because it was brilliant. But the space really did lend itself to the music. The music, you feel that you do play into the space, and I really love doing that. So this kind of battery mobile thing is totally something I'm very interested in. And I know we've been mentioning it quite a lot, and the MyVolts Kickstarter thing,
yes, it got funded. Yeah,
was successful. Yeah, and the great thing with that is that I'll be able to bring a lot of my 9-volt equipment. Well, not just 9-volt now, is it? They're doing 12-volt, I think 18 volts as well.
I really haven't seen that, but
only DC though. They can't make it work with AC. But to be able to bring a whole bunch of things into the battery environment by utilizing this, by plugging it in to a 9-volt unit, but going into a phone battery. And I've been finding those phone batteries, well, we've got some quite big ones that are big enough to do full iPad charges, that they last for a long time when you run them off those batteries. So much longer than if you run it off the equivalent of AA batteries, or rather, some of these devices that run on AA batteries have also got a USB port that you can power it off USB, run it off the USB battery for so much longer. So,
that's got to be a good thing, isn't it? Really?
Yeah. Like running all the Volcas off one battery rather than having to fart around changing all 6 AA batteries into each unit. So just plug the MyVolts cable into the phone battery, and it's really, really cool. So I've been the speakers I've been using for my battery setup have been 2 mini rig.
Yeah, no, I've seen those. They're not. I'm going to ask something else, because one thing I wanted to do is come back and just sort of. There's another question that's associated with this. Rich, do you think? you play in a lot of different places, obviously festival stages, you played Red Rocks and stuff. Did you find that your playing was more epic, you were more adventurous or more atmospheric? Do you think it really greatly affects the way that you might perhaps more improvise? Because obviously if you're playing specifically tailored music that is more reproduction of a classic track, whatever, do you think it greatly affects that environment, affects the way that you would play?
Well, it sort of affects everything. It's wonderful to play outside, first of all, whether it's around a campfire or at Red Rocks or at the Hollywood Bowl or, in somebody's backyard. It's just fun to play music outside, just for openers. And, when we compare this to something like that, well, obviously that's a much larger scale, and you've got crew involved. The difficulty for me in this, well, I had a couple of difficulties. is that most of these things don't make a sound without separate amplification and speaker. And thus, you're carrying a whole ton of stuff to the beach in order to have this jam with your friends on your Volcas or whatever. And the actual size of what you have to bring becomes large, whereas if we return to the singing around the campfire paradigm,
with a guitar,
an acoustic guitar or two and a couple of drums, and you're there. It's not... You don't have to create this whole audio environment in order for the thing to exist. So on some level, as much as romantically I kind of enjoy the idea that you can do this, I'm not likely to be one who's doing it.
That's fair. I mean, there's a whole movement. I mean, the modular... Oh gosh, the Banahafar and Eric. No, what were they called? They do
the bit miners in Bristol.
Yeah. Oh, is that one as well?
Yeah, but that's a monthly session that takes place in the Miners' Arms. So Bit Miners seems like a good name for it.
Oh yes, I think you mentioned that. You bring...
That's an entirely battery-based jam session. So people bring whatever they want to bring, and just... and what's quite funny is people at that session, they don't do individual performances. You just literally bring what you do and get given a sync cable and just join in, and it's just a...
So it's primarily Volca based, I'd imagine, based on the sync cable thing.
Yeah, pocket operators and the like.
Okay. Ty, what about you? I mean, obviously, as a man who's very much tied to his setup, because you have to have repeatability. You have to. I know you've got a mobile rig as well, but when you do go to mobile stuff and maybe write in different places, do you find it greatly affects the stuff that you do, or is it more about the technology that affects it?
It's both. I think the environment that you're writing in does completely alter how you write. I mean, I know for a fact the last time when we went away on holiday and I did a lot of work on the mobile rig, I did most of that outside, either sat on a balcony or on a beach with a beautiful view and all that kind of thing, and that did absolutely affect the way I wrote. It wasn't obviously the technology side of things affects the way you write, because obviously my mobile rig is more limited than the full studio rig, and sometimes those limitations are actually what makes it work and what makes it better, to be fair. And I've said this time and time again. But yeah, the environment itself does affect everything, and I love the idea. I absolutely love the idea of everything running off batteries, but it's becoming more and more doable. But I mean, what Rich was saying about kind of the rig gets bigger and bigger, I think that really did used to be true, but these days there's more stuff that's coming out which kind of negates that really, and it's quite easy to take a small rig. I mean, I've got a little I don't know what the make is, a little speaker, not like one of the what's-name speakers that Gaz and I have got, kind of the round tube ones, whatever they're called. What are they called, Gaz?
Mini rigs, yeah.
The mini, yeah. I mean, I've got a couple of those, but above that there's like a little PA speaker I've got, which is probably about the size of an iPad, but it sounds fantastic, rechargeable. And then another thing that I've got recently, which I really didn't think I was going to be impressed with, and I've completely dismissed it, which is the Keith McMillen K-Mix, which again, that can run off battery as well, because it can be powered by USB. And I don't. Has anyone tried the K-Mix?
No, I've been trying to get hold of one for review, and they did say they sent one, but I probably need to poke them again. Obviously, they've probably got other.
But do you know when it got announced? To be honest, I completely dismissed it. I've got all the other Keith McMillen stuff, and I think a bit like Gaz, really, I'd kind of used it and had my time with it, and just kind of gone, yeah, it's fine, but I can't really find a really good use for it. And I looked at the K-Mix, and it just didn't tick any boxes, and it just didn't, no, it just wasn't for me, really. And then one way and another, I got to have a play with one, and my God, what it can do is incredible. It's absolutely incredible. It's an 8-in 10-out mixer, if you use it as a normal mixer, with built-in compression and EQ and reverb and all the normal stuff. But then it's also a DAW controller, and it's also a MIDI interface, all with sliders. And it's all completely sealable, so it's spillable. You can spill things on it, and But the main thing going for it is it's smaller than an iPad. It's smaller than an iPad, and is a full contained surround sound mixer if you want it.
Huh.
And There are very few things that I look at and go, oh, this is of no interest, and then I literally complete change of direction. I can honestly say that K-Mix is incredible, absolutely incredible. So that, in terms of traveling, I know for a fact that in terms of my traveling rig now, that has just replaced my Apogee Duet and replaced a lot of my Steinberg controllers.
Oh wow!
Just
I'm just going to throw a shot. That's the it's a kind of it's like a Cuneo type control surface, more faders, but with an audio interface and a MIDI interface built in, right? What does that?
But it's so much more than that. That's the thing, because what you've just said is exactly how I perceived it. But it's a great little unit, and it's just so compact. I mean, it really is smaller than It's kind of halfway between a mini iPad and a normal sized iPad.
Right. Oh,
and it's hardly got any depth to it. It's about, at the widest point, it's a wedge, and at the widest point, it's about the width of a video cassette, just slightly bigger than a video. And then it goes very narrow. So it just slips into a gig bag, and it just solves so many issues. A complete surprise, I have to say.
Right. Oh, nice tip there, Ty. Brilliant. I mean, I think the battery thing is very interesting. I mean, we're going to be going to, I should put a plug this, is Kimmery Beats is on Saturday in Cardiff at Chapter Arts. And during the day from about 1 o'clock, there's a kind of modular meet, so you'll be able to see various synthesizers and chat to synth people. And then from 6 o'clock, there are, I think, 5 or 6 performers. I'm one of those, but we're going to be streaming that. And we've set up, we've designed, and we're testing a new rig. And one of the things that I've got there, I mean, we should have a good, decent wired connection. We've specified that, so it should be a much better quality. But we've got a multiple iPad and an iPhone as camera sources, which is all self-contained. Plus, they all run off batteries. Plus, I've got this router which I can plug in, so we've got our own separate wireless network for them all to sit on. But that's also got a plug for a modem, which I've just tested, and I get 5 megabits up on a modem. So that's plenty for the video stream. And all of that can run off a battery, the whole thing. So we could do live streaming, 4-camera live streaming with sound from a field, which is something I'm trying to find the applications for that, but I think actually, once you start to use them and once you start to think about it, that means that you could do live events very, very easily, not constrained by networks necessarily if you've got a decent cellular signal. So, I mean, all those things it's becoming sort of in the same way it's becoming massively connected, it's also becoming massively disconnected, and you get this ability to be able to do OB and all of this stuff. So, but we'll be streaming from 6 o'clock. There are various performers there, but if you're in Cardiff, head down to Chapter Arts, and we'll be there from about 1 p.m, something like that. So, and I've been working on getting my set back together again, which is actually really difficult after leaving it for such a long time, trying to recreate the same vibe and feeling I had when I was writing the stuff for that first bit is quite a different situation. And I'm in the same place. All I've done is built a slightly different rig, but it's curious how that happens like that. But that's enough of the plugging of that sort of thing. But yes, these guys, if you're interested to know what they did, what they were using, they had quite a lot of stuff. Behringer Xenix mixer, Korg Pandora, which is a multi-effects, Alesis SR18 drum machine, Microkorg XL, Volca bass, Volca keys, Monotribe, Volca beats, more Volca bass, Roland Boutique JU06, couple of through splitters, and a couple of like tablets stroke notepads for recording the audio, and it seemed to work. I just had this awful feeling that perhaps they had to transport the whole lot there in a canoe or something, and I was starting to get really scared about the water damage. But why not? It seems like a great idea. Okay. Rich, I don't know if you've got time for this, but this was the Synclavier V, which I'm quite interested in because I know that you had an attachment with Synclavier, right? Okay, I'll press go and let's see what happens. Nothing. Excellent. That's probably because. Oh, here we go. There we are. So this is a new instrument that Arturia have, a software instrument. The Synclavier V. They worked with Cameron Jones, who was one of the original developers of it.
I'm Glenn Darcy, Vice President of Product Management for Arturia. Today we are proud to announce the new Synclavier V software.
It's not today, I should add. It was probably 2 or 3 weeks ago. But
additive and time-slice synthesis methods found in the original Synclavier. Working in partnership with Cameron Jones, the original inventor of the Synclavier system, We have recreated this classic synthesizer and have even taken it far beyond the original in its synthesis capabilities. In 1972...
I won't play the whole thing because obviously you can go and see that video elsewhere. It's not exclusive to us by any means. The Synclavier V, I mean, it's all part of the V collection, which actually seems like a better deal because if you buy it separately, it's quite expensive, I think, €199, so I guess nearly $200 for a single instrument. But one of the things that, I mean, obviously the Synclavier is a massively iconic instrument, one that many people would never even, I've never even seen one in the flesh. You know, I remember seeing pictures of them and thinking, wow, that looks classy, and hearing that these kind of superstars used them, but I've never had the chance to check it out. And I know, Rich, you were hired as a kind of Synclavier driver at certain points in your career as well. So does this excite you? Or, I mean, how do you feel about this? Because I mean, there must be something about the physical presence of a $125,000 instrument that has a certain frisson about it.
Well, Synclavier was wonderful. I didn't spend that much of my time, like I would say less than 5% of my time on a Synclavier was spent working with the synthesis capabilities and using them beyond calling up existing patches. However, it was a cool synth. This is a cool product. I have it and I've played with it, and it seems like it does a lot of really cool stuff for somebody who wants to dig into that kind of an FM presentation. And initially, when the Synclavier was released, it was a synthesizer, and it was shortly thereafter they put in the, what did they call it? File manager, SFM, sample file manager. And they were able to take an individual sample and work with that. And then eventually they got, you know, polyphonic sampling into the thing, and then direct-to-disc recording and on and on. But this is a very cool and interesting product, and I think Arturia is likely to do pretty well with it.
So, what would you describe as the kind of sonic fingerprint of that kind of world? Because obviously, to my mind, all I recall is very bright, sparkly stuff, and the most, as I understood it, the most high fidelity sample playback that was available at the time. Is that a fair thing, or is there more to it?
Yeah, well, it certainly, the Synclavier had a fantastic sound in playback of anything. It would just really, the audio that came out of the thing sounded wonderful, and still probably does, I'm sure. So, yeah, the actual hardware itself was great sounding and fun to operate. You know, on the downside, the buttons were crap, and the power supplies blew about 1 or 2 a year.
Really?
Oh, yeah. It was horribly underspec'd in terms of the power supplies. But at least the early ones, and the one I was operating was. Yeah, we would replace a power supply a year, maybe 2.
Wow. I didn't realise that, because they always looked like they were... Because the thing about the Fairlight, which was, you know, the other massively expensive kind of iconic instrument of the time, perhaps a little bit later, was it always looked like a sort of cheap computer rack with a kind of a relatively nice keyboard by comparison. The Synclavier looked like it had a sort of class and had wood end cheeks, for God's sake, and, you know, backlit buttons, which at the time was kind of quite a thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and the buttons were cool and did a lot of different stuff, but they also could be broken.
Wow.
If I remember correctly, it was tricky to replace one of them at a time. You'd have to replace a row of them at a time, if I'm not mistaken. It's all on one row. But and I might be wrong about that. That's a vague recollection. But Synclavier is a fantastic thing, and it was really exciting at the time, and the synthesis capabilities were cool, and a lot of people did a lot more work on that part of the machine than I did. But this software by Arturia is really nice. I'm very pleased about it.
Oh, cool. Ty, you're a man who has a legendary collection of synthesizers. First of all, have you ever actually played, touched, been in the presence of a real Synclavier?
I have played one, and exactly like Rich said, the sound quality that comes out of them it's proper top end stuff, really. I mean, it just sounds beautiful, and I think the way that Arturia have done this is the right way of doing it, because there were lots of calls at the time going, well, what's the point in having a Synclavier if you haven't got the sample library, and etc. 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 There are plenty of sample libraries out there that take all the Synclavier library and do what they want with them. But, you know, this was the thing about the Synclavier that was kind of overlooked, was as Rich said, it was a synth. It was always meant to be a synth. It wasn't meant to be a sampler. And the sampling kind of came because they could, really, and because Fairlight were doing it. And so that's kind of why the sampling side of things took off. And but as a synthesizer, it's always been incredible. It's always had that, as you say, that kind of high-end kind of FM sheen kind of sound. And what Arturia have done with it is fantastic. And also, just a plug for Arturia, that their collection, the V collection, is a bargain.
Yeah, it's €399. So for the price of two Synclavier Vs, you just get the whole lot.
You get everything. You get absolutely everything. It is as a collection, it is fantastic. I mean, you could quite happily, if you're into synthesizers, if you can't make some really good music with just that collection, then you're doing something wrong. It's true.
I should mention, because there was Wookie in the chat room said he didn't like the GUIs, too small and fiddly. I'm pretty sure that they've updated all of that in the latest version, so you can make larger and they're scalable, so you are able to actually make it bigger and what have you. So that's a bit. And there's a new browser. I remember I forget the name of the chap who works at Arturia, and he showed me some of that stuff at Mesa before release, and that it did look much more scalable. Yeah, it did look.
No, they've changed a lot of it. They've changed Jupiter 8. They've changed CS80. They've changed quite a few of them, and they've made it all a lot more usable. And it's great. But the Synclavier, I think what I was afraid that everything that you played in it was suddenly going to take you back to 1985, and there are some patches in there that does happen.
Well, it has the original patches, they boldly claim. So.
Well, I don't know if they're the original patches, but there's a lot that you're thinking, oh, I've heard this before, I've heard that before. There are a lot of patches that you're very familiar with. I don't know whether they're the original, kind of programs, but you can do so much more with it. It's a really nice synth engine. It is really nice.
Okay.
Well worth exploring.
I've just spotted in the YouTube chat room, Synth Anatomy has an extensive demo of the Synclavier V on his channel. If you want to check that out, I will do, because obviously you get what you get from the manufacturers is a different perspective, so that'd be interesting to do. I know, Gaz, I know you said you weren't so necessarily connected with software instruments these days, but I mean, a lot of people, they have this because it's standard fare, isn't it? It's the thing, it's one of the things you must have this because there's just all of these things in there, and the Synclavier may be an exciting prospect to you as well.
Well, I mean, it's always been this. I've never seen one in, for real ever, but it was something that it's been on my radar for a very long time. I first saw one in the Sting film Bring On the Night, which I think was released in 1987, perhaps. It was about the recording of his Dream of the Blue Turtles album. So that was back in about 1985. I think it was in a chateau in France. And Sting is playing the Synclavier, and that's the first time I'd ever seen one. And then I remember going through the big Zappa phase and getting albums like Jazz from Hell, which is entirely Synclavier, and Civilization Phase 3 as well, another Zappa album made entirely on the Synclavier. In fact, the Synclavier...
It was sequencing. It was the sequencing that really kind of got a lot of people excited.
Because he was looking for this... He was getting increasingly frustrated that musicians couldn't play the music that he was composing. So when he got hold of a Synclavier, he almost abandoned his musicians, and he thought, right, finally, here's a way that I can realize my music. So it's been something that I've been really intrigued about. I never really understood how the sequencing side of it works. I haven't looked at the Arturia one. Does it have any sequencing facilities? Does it emulate the sequencer at all, or is it just the sound engine?
There we go. Rich has answered your questions just by the sheer movement of his head. Astonishing. So yes, no, I suppose not. But that would make sense. I mean, the DAW is going to be a far more advanced GUI.
Yeah, that's true. But you're going to work in a different way, though, aren't you?
Yeah,
and that's what I thought. Because obviously Zappa was doing all that stuff, pretty advanced sequencing stuff, I guess, especially for the time. So that's always been something that's quite interesting to me. But in terms of the sonic, I don't know the sonic. I don't know the sound of it particularly.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the opening notes of Thriller are
it is
are a Synclavier. Is a Synclavier.
Yeah.
So and also the other thing that I read, I think when I was looking about this when it first came out, was that it was actually the first commercial manifestation of FM synthesis, if I am correct about that as well. Even though it wasn't as advanced as 6 operator. I don't know how many operators it had. Was it 3 or 2 oscillators for FM? I can't remember. 4 oscillators, right? So 4 operators rather.
But the way it works is slightly different to the way a DX works. So you can get very advanced sounds that you couldn't get out of a DX because of the way it works with harmonics. So
that's a good one.
It's very clever.
Well, I must check it out. I haven't had the opportunity yet, but yes, that's available as well. So I think it's going to be one of those. I mean, all of these things are useful to have, and I don't know how easy it is to program. I mean, I'd imagine, because GUIs were less so advanced, certainly in the 80s, unless it was null per function kind of stuff. How was it to program, Rich? Was it kind of a bit of a night? I mean, I guess they had an operator in the U, so not everybody was a cup of tea to sit there and program with it.
It wasn't hard to operate at all.
Ah, okay.
There were some GUI interface things on the Synclavier that were absolutely brilliant and really fast, and the sequencing was really great, and the rhythmic tightness of what came out of the thing was stunning and kind of hard to beat in any other way, and kind of made even the MIDI. It even set MIDI out very tightly as compared to using other MIDI interfaces when it became a MIDI interface generator.
I could just imagine. Yeah, we got the Synclavier for the tight MIDI. It was only 128 grand.
Used to like to do it that way. Yes.
Wow, that is astonishing. That's kudos, isn't it?
It was cool. It was really
excellent. I think that's probably it for today. So I want to say thank you everybody for joining us. It's been a great conversation as ever. Just to remind you again, Cymru Beats on Saturday the 18th this week. And we have Cymru. I'm so sorry, Gaz. I do my best.
Cymru Beats.
Right. It just looks like it should say Cymru because it's CYMRU.
Yeah.
So it's your own fault for spelling it weirdly. You Welsh people.
Cymru. Wales tomorrow.
Oh, yes. I just put £5 for Wales to win the Euro 26. I got 66 to 1. I reckon they're going to beat England, that's for sure. But
it's our first time in a competition since 1958, maybe?
Yeah.
So I think it's dead exciting.
It is, and they play well. For those of you who don't know what we're talking about, this is the European Soccer Championships. It's happened every 4 years, 2 years offset from the World Cup. So, and it's quite a big deal. Anyway, we won't go into it, but hopefully England and Russia won't get kicked out. But that would be really embarrassing. But I want to say thank you. I'll start with you, Gaz. Thank you very much for joining us. And Glastonbury, is it Glastonbury this weekend or next weekend?
It's next weekend, so I've got an enormously busy. I think I mentioned about that before.
Yeah, you got a lot of bands.
It's now seven gigs, so we're going to have a very busy festival. And I don't know, did I mention about the Lost Horizons gig on the Saturday? It's at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. If anyone's going to Glastonbury, by the way, should say 3:30 Thursday, Matuki, 5 o'clock. 5 o'clock Friday, Rumbelows bandstand. 3 o'clock, Matuki in the Lost Horizons. I'll come back and mention something about that one.
Oh, yeah.
7 p.m. Saturday, Small World, Matuki. 10 o'clock Sunday, 10 o'clock at night, bandstand, Asteroid Deluxe, and 1 a.m. in the morning. Last thing is Charlotte Church's Pop Dungeon. So it's going to be a but the Lost Horizons one's going to be fun. It's an entirely nude gig. So I don't quite know. And what that is there's a part of the festival it's an enclosed area, and it's where they've got hot tubs and saunas and that kind of thing, and people are expected to disrobe completely, and there's a little stage in there, and they ask the bands to follow suit or follow birthday suit.
Jesus, but that's a prospect.
So I'm a bit kind of don't quite know how that one's going to go. But
because I'd imagine if you're terribly nervous, when a gentleman is terribly nervous, then one's vitals tend to shrink into one's body. So it's not going to be your best potential presentation of your manhood.
My bass is kind of in the right place, if you know what I mean. But a mate of mine said he'll come and watch the gig and he'll go in the nudie blues, as I call it. He'll go in the nudie blues if I raise my bass height. That's the deal. So, yeah.
Right, I'm imagining they're not going to live stream that particular event, and unless you have some sort of special pay TV type of license. But anyway, Gaz, thank you for sharing with that. That sounds like great fun. I was going to say, because it's peeing with rain here, and I think, I hope it's not this weekend. But it sounds like this
me too. It's going to be a nightmare if it rains with all them gigs, because trudging around.
Oh God, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, that does remind me of a Glastonbury. I used to stage manage the acoustic stage back in the mid-late 80s at Glastonbury, and it got bigger and bigger and bigger, and as they started to bring in more mainstream acts, it got really kind of quite hardcore and security, and it was really full on. And I remember we had a sort of production caravan backstage, and it was very hot one year, and I was sitting in the caravan talking to one of the production team about something that had to be done, and this lady walks in with a clipboard and nothing else on whatsoever. She was being, free and festival-like, but it was really uncomfortable for everybody there. But she was. I admire her braveness, braveness. But yeah, it was weird. I guess if we'd all been naked, it would have been a lot easier for all of us. But I wasn't about to take my clothes off. But anyway, that's just a story. Rich, thank you very much for joining us as well. I know you're a busy guy too, so thank you. It's been a pleasure having you, and I hope we will speak to you again soon.
It's been great, thank you. And I wanted to say I'm coming to the UK next week, and I'll be in London by Wednesday, and we've got the Fold Festival on that weekend. So I'll be around.
Okay,
I won't have a lot of time, but I'll be around.
Oh well, if we can geographically synchronise, that might be cool. But keep me posted of your movements. Always nice to see you in the flesh, though. I promise it will just be from the neck up, the neck up and the knees down.
Yeah. Me too. Yeah. I promise.
Anyway, cheers, Rich, and of course. Ty Unwin's icon there. Thank you so much for joining us, Ty. I know you are extremely busy, and I do appreciate you. And I hope we've in some way managed to recharge your battery so that you can go back with fresh ears, eyes, and fingers back to your work.
Absolutely. Just so you know, just to keep in with Gaz, so I'm completely naked here, obviously, just because
you can.
I just thought it was get in the mood and swing of things. I'm really sorry that the camera's not working today, but no, I'm sorry about the lack of video. But, as I said earlier on, it is literally just because of the football. When it's streaming and living in the middle of nowhere, the whole broadband seems to go at the speed of a small rodent, and so so I do sorry about that. But
that's
yes,
right,
back to work for me.
Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure having you as ever. And
thank you.
Oh, excuse me. So yes, just to reiterate, we'll be streaming live again from 6 p.m. on Saturday with the performers at Cymru Beats. Sorry, Gaz. And that will include myself, and I should actually say who the other performers are. Thipol Sandra. Let me see. I can probably write this down. I should have probably Cymru Beats. Well, while I look for that, I'll remind you of our competition. Don't forget, we're having the chance to win iZotope's vocal synth. You tweet the hashtag SuperVoice and the hashtag vocal synth. That's the hashtag SuperVoice and the hashtag vocal synth to @SonicState and @iZotope Inc. To enter for a chance of winning. Let me see if I can find the Cymru Beats. Yes, I even spelt that wrong. That's no good, is it? Let's see who we've got there. Okay, so we've got Thipol Sandra, VCO ADSR, who's really good, someone called Mute Groups, Eden Gray, someone called Nick Bat, and so that makes it 5 people. So yes, we'll be streaming that. And look, it says event streaming live. You probably can't see that because it's too small. Let me see if I can make that a bit bigger. Event live stream on sonicstate.com. Actually, we'll be streaming it live via YouTube, so that's where you'll see it. Anyway, that's it for this time. Thank you very much for watching and listening, everybody. Don't forget, subscribe to the channel and get more of our good stuff. See you later.